Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weirdly Magical podcast. And I am Lou. Jen was unable to join us today. And we don't often do interviews on our podcast. It's not our thing. But we were asked by the wonderful Demetrius Bagley to interview a couple of astrologers from the Queer Astrology Conference. And I chose Mychal because we had connected on Facebook a little while ago, and we'd had a couple of interactions, and I find him really interesting, and I hope you do too. So Mychal is an astrologer, journalist, and hypnotherapist practicing in the Bahamas. I'm not going to give you all his qualifications because he's really well qualified. He's the founder of the Oraculous School of Astrology, which is really, really interesting. And he offers a comprehensive training in traditional Renaissance, Hori, electional, natal, and modern Uranian astrology, which is the bit I'm really interested in. And he's a lifelong scholar of the Kabbalistic. Am I saying that right?
Yes, the Kabbalistic tarot.
Yeah. I know the Cabal, but I've never said that whole word. So.
Mhm.
And I love the tarot too, by the way. I use
Yes.
decks.
Ah,
Yeah. So we have a lot of kind of interest over crossover. But
yeah.
I'm here to talk to Mychal and ask him about him. So let's start with a little bit of your history, if you would, how you got into astrology, the usual.
Okay, well, Lou, thank you so much for having me here, and also thank you, Jen, even though she isn't here right now. I got into everything because I had a burning bush experience, kind of like, who was it? Was it Moses in the wilderness where the bush started to burn and then the presence of the Lord spake from the bush? I had one of those burning bush experiences probably when I was around the age of 7 years old. I was outside in the front of this bush that was growing in front of our house, and I just stood there looking at the bush, and the bush caught this brilliant violet flame, and then I was thrown to the floor, knocked unconscious, woke up, laying down on the floor. So obviously I had a dream and the bush wasn't really burning. But the strange thing is that when I woke up, I was laying down on the floor in front of this bush, the bush completely intact, but I had this internal feeling that something was different. And I think that was my initial initiation into all things weirdly magical.
Mm.
And from there, a couple of years passed, but I always was interested in the paranormal, the occult, that sort of thing spoke to me deeply.
Mm.
And around the age of 12 years old, 11, 12, I found out about the Unity Center of Light, which is a metaphysical Christian organization that has a branch in the Bahamas. And they had a metaphysical bookstore attached to them, which was the Way of Life bookstore. And I'm actually jumping forward because before that, I had met a witch dropping off her son to his kindergarten class on my way to my primary school class, or I think I may have been in grade 7 at the time or something. But there was a practitioner of Wicca in the parking lot who had a copy of, I think it was Scott Cunningham, in her back seat window, and then next to that was this copy of this book by, I'm going to say her name awfully wrong, oh Lord, she's a Wiccan, a witch who wrote a series of books, and one of them was on astral projection. And so I saw this book on astral projection in her back window, and I was like, oh my God, there are other people in the Bahamas who even know what that is. and, and so we started talking, and oh gosh, like, geez, my metaphysical thing started even before that, because we started talking, and the agreement was that I would teach her tarot.
Mm.
I was 11 years old. Like, having this conversation with you is just bringing up all these memories. I was 11 years old, and I agreed to teach this woman when I was 11 years old how to use tarot and the runes, and she would teach me how to astral project.
Wow.
And I which means that I've been telling people all this time that I've been doing this for 15 years, but I've been doing this for even longer than 15 years because our agreement was that I would teach her what I knew and she would teach me what she knew. And anyway, it's just all downhill from there, down a wonderful rabbit hole, and that rabbit hole quickly integrated tarot, and it also quickly integrated astrology because I came into tarot and astrology at much the same time.
Mhm.
And I just loved it, and I haven't turned back. And my particular study of the tarot has been the study of the tarot that's rooted in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So yes, that's Arthur Edward Waite, but that's also Aleister Crowley and Paul Foster Case. So I never came into tarot with a very flippant relationship to tarot. It was always this deep Hermetic Kabbalistic tarot that had astrology as its underpinning. So my entire life with tarot has been a life with astrology.
Mhm.
And so I learned the two things at the same time. And I entered professional practice probably around the age of 13 years old, where I was giving people readings for money, astrology and tarot. And I'm 28 years old today. And so it's just stuck with me this entire time. And it has become the entire shape and fabric of my life.
You're 28 today?
I'm 28.
Oh, no, I meant it's not your birthday today. You're 28.
Oh, no, 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 no.
No.
I'm 28 at this moment in 2020. My birthday was in May, and I'm 28 right now.
I'm almost jealous of your early awakening because I'm from a very you can tell I'm English probably from a very working class background and things, and I kind of secretly studied Crowley and stuff when I was
Hmm.
a teenager, but it was just not really. I didn't know anybody. I didn't come across anybody like you did, so I
Yeah.
didn't come to astrology fully
Hmm.
until my first Saturn return, which you're about to.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
You
And I didn't
know,
start practicing professionally till 2012. So,
wow, that's super cool. I think that a lot of us, we either come to astrology at our Jupiter return at 12 or 24, or our Saturn return at around 28, 30.
yeah,
And I just think that those are really pivotal moments of initiation and of starting a new phase of life.
yeah,
Your Jupiter return, you're starting your teens. When it comes again at 24, you're starting like young adulthood, and your Saturn return is like everything is now solidified and you have to like make a decision about who you're going to be for the rest of your life. And so yeah, I really think that astrology tends to find a lot of us at these pivotal
hmm
points of Jupiter or Saturn, and I think that it's all beautiful.
oh, it is.
But yeah, yeah.
You were just one of the younger ones. So.
I mean,
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I grew up in a very Christian family, in a very Christian environment, in a very Christian country.
Yeah.
So I also had to study secretly. And I won't say secretly because I have Mercury in Aries square Uranus. So there was nothing secret about what I did. It was really out in people's faces, sometimes uncomfortably so, because I was just the most obnoxious child. I was like, oh my God, I believe in astrology. You have to believe in astrology too. I was giving readings to God, did I give readings to my high school teachers? I'm pretty sure that
Probably.
I've given readings to like my high school teachers, and then to like my university teachers, my university professors. And so my entire life was really full throttle tarot and astrology. And I mean, but I think the unspoken agreement between me and my parents, well, me and my mom, was that you could do whatever the hell you want as long as you bring home good grades.
Yeah.
And then the year when I didn't bring home good grades, which was in grade seven, was the year when all my books got burnt, all of my everything got thrown away, because that was the year that I screwed up. And so everything just went down the toilet. At the first C I brought home, it was bye bye astrology, bye
Wow.
bye everything. But
Oh,
by that point it was already like in me. So I mean the books, losing them was a big deal, but it was already in my mind.
and I bet most of them have come back to you anyway.
Yes, they
So
are.
yeah. So when did you start kind of your formal astrology journey? I see you're NCGR level 3, and
Hmm.
yeah. So when
So
did
my formal, this is an interesting question, and for a number of reasons. One, I have a very strong Saturn, so I tend to seek out official recognition in whatever, which is
Mhm.
why I got involved in the NCGR and why I studied with Lee Lehman and why I did all of this stuff, because I tend to seek out the officiality of being recognized by my colleagues and peers. I think that that's a big deal. But my formal education in astrology happened when I was 13 years old.
Right.
It was in that, I dare say, decade and decade and a couple of years that I read and I gave readings and I gave thousands and thousands of readings in that over 10-year span. And that really served as the underpinning of everything that I am today. And when I look at my relationship to the NCGR, while I do love the fact that I did that exam 2 years ago
Mhm.
and that I've gone through that process as well, um, my education in astrology is my entire life, with astrology, and having the paper to acknowledge that is only an official stamp. But I mean, honestly, between the two of us, and I love NCGR to like the in the bottom of my heart, but I didn't learn how to be an astrologer taking the NCGR exams, and
Oh, I
um,
completely agree. I'm not formally certified in anything yet. I did take all 3 levels of my teachers, uh,
mhm, mhm,
my
mhm.
main teachers' classes, and lots of other things. But I taught myself how to hand draw the
Yeah,
charts and hand calculate them way back in
yeah.
the day. And I always tell my students and my clients that the best way to learn astrology is to do readings. So
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think so many of us we study astrology on our own before we even know that there's something like NCGR that exists,
yes.
and we study astrology on our own before we even realize that you can become certified
Mhm.
in astrology or anything like that. So that was definitely my experience of it, that I studied by myself, and it was wonderful. And then when I found out about NCGR, it only made it that much greater because I now had a piece of paper to finally say to the world that, hey, this is what I do. And, it's official.
So tell me a little bit about Uranian astrology, which I must say I've been side-eyeing for quite a while because I'm really more taught in the evolutionary astrology uh,
Uh-huh.
range, but I kind of don't do it the way evolutionary astrologers do it, and I've been really interested in Uranian to the point where I'm
uh
probably going to end up studying it. So
so my relationship with Iranian astrology largely started through my relationship to the NCGR.
Mhm.
And that's because Mira Epstein, who plays a very formative role in the overall structure of the NCGR, she is very deeply involved in Iranian astrology as well. So that was my big entrance point into Uranian. And I think that I vaguely remember seeing Robert Hand in his book on horoscope symbols. I think it was, he mentioned Uranian astrology a couple times, and then
Oh,
there was stuff about the dials and all that stuff. And so you saw the 360-degree dial, and you also saw the 90-degree dial. And so he spoke about it.
yeah.
And because I had that book on my shelf for a very long time, I I was aware that this stuff existed, but I never had someone to really guide me. And I think that everyone who reads Robert Hand's horoscope symbols, like you see him talking about cosmobiology and the dials, and then you just ignore it.
Yes.
because because it looks like this entirely new, it looks like this completely strange animal, and it's like, what the hell is this? Like, I bought this book to learn astrology, and you're teaching me about cosmobiology. So I just kind of skipped past that chapter entirely. But then when I met Mira, she was really like, she's a gung ho Iranian through and through. And so she introduced me to Iranian astrology, but it was Iranian light. And once again, like, I have Saturn issues, I have Pluto issues in my chart. So if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it like all the way. And
That's Capricorn.
yeah,
Conjunct my
right,
ascendant.
precisely. So like, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it all the way. And so I sought out like the greatest Iranian astrologers I could find on the planet, and I landed on Gary Kristen, who is the founder of Astrolabe up in Boston, Massachusetts. And Gary started teaching me Uranian. And I mean, he calls it symmetrical astrology, and he has his reasons for calling it that. But it's essentially the Uranian system. And he started teaching me Uranian astrology as it should be taught. And that really changed my entire approach to astrology, because it's this rich, beautiful astrology that seems really modern on the outside, but it's really based on the most ancient of astrologies.
Mhm.
And at the same time, like, it doesn't matter if it's modern or ancient. The fact is, it works. Like, my telephone works, my laptop works, Uranian
Exactly.
astrology works. I think that the traditional astrology community needs to get over it, because Uranian astrology, it works in ways that traditional astrology just can't.
Yeah. I think a lot of the astrology community need to get over being set in one way personally. But
Yeah, I mean, we come to astrology because we're weird, like at
yeah,
some level we're weird within our families, and
yeah.
astrology is the family that finds us, and it gives us like a framework for our weirdness. So how do we start to have prejudice against one set of weird people within an entire ocean of weird people? Like, it's just ridiculous.
So you in your main bio on your website, you talk about classical astrology, and Uranian astrology, harmonics, hermeticism, Kabbalah. How do you integrate do you integrate all of that in your oraculous astrology? And how do you do a reading then with people? I know you do blind reading. We'll talk about that. I do some of that too, so I'm a fan of
Yeah.
it.
Um, so how I integrate it is that, classical astrology is really the basis of the entire thing. And I think that as a classical astrologer who is also rigorously modern in terms of my approach to Iranian astrology, and even there, I have to like qualify that, because I skipped the entire psychological boom in astrology. So I know nothing at all about psychological astrology, which it was
Which I
even
do.
right, which was made even more evident to me yesterday when I was interviewing Karen Hamaker Zondak for my podcast, the True Divination podcast, and she started to like really go into psychological astrology, and I was like, oh my god, why don't I know any of this stuff? Like, I knew not, like, it was like, geez, like, I feel like I missed out on an entire part of my formative education because I just skipped over the 60s and 70s completely. Um, but so I start every reading within a classical framework, and I also teach and practice the work of Jean-Baptiste Morin de Villefranche, which, I mean, in the 21st century, we call it Morinus, the Morinus system of chart interpretation. And so that is rigorously 17th century. But even he was kind of radical for his day and age, because he did some stuff that just weren't done in the 17th
Right.
century. So he was also a weirdo back then, which is what I love about him. But he also made a very clean and specific way of how to interpret charts. So when I give someone a reading, I am initially entering the space of a consultation with that as my framework. And then after I've taken that as far as I could possibly take that, then I start to integrate the Iranian techniques.
Mm.
And I mean, it's like it's in my mind already, so there isn't really a way to differentiate them.
Yeah.
But it's the classical work, and then it's the Iranian work, and then I go back and forth between the two. Um, so I think I answered your question in a roundabout sort of way,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you did. You did. Yeah. Yeah. And So the blind reading. I did watch a little bit. You did a blind reading kind of Zoom thing like this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I didn't have time to finish it,
Yeah.
but I've done a lot of blind mini readings, I call them.
Hmm.
I'll just say, right, we're going to do a reading on the eclipses, and I don't ask any
Hmm.
questions. I just do it, and I
Hmm.
find they're just as impactful as
Hmm.
the readings where I do an intake form and things,
Yeah.
and or if I meet the people in person. So,
Yeah.
do you do all your readings blind or yeah?
Ah, wow, you're asking all the best questions. And and I hope that I'm not hated after this interview because I'm not sure that I'm answering in the most politically correct sort of way.
I'm not
But
a fan of that. I'm a fan of doing it however's right for you. So
okay, great. Well, I love that. I love that about you. We're like the best of friends now.
yeah.
So in terms of the blind reading situation, why did I start that? So I started doing that publicly because that's just how I always gave readings. Like I never knew that there was another way to give someone a reading other than a blind reading because I didn't have a teacher. So when I came into astrology, I taught myself how to be an astrologer.
Mhm.
And I taught myself that with books and I taught myself that with clients. And so I never realized that there was another way. I didn't know that you were supposed to interview your clients and find out about their lives before giving them a reading. That just seemed very counterintuitive to me.
Mhm.
So I've always, within my childhood, growing up as an astrologer, I've always given blind readings. I mean, that's just been the entire shape of my life. And then in 2018, when I got exposed to the larger astrological community, and I was like, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong all these years.
No, you haven't.
like I had a complete meltdown because I realized that there are people who were like having a proper interview with their clients beforehand, um, and then going into the chart guarded with that information. Um, so I kind of like had a moment with that, and it was kind of like an existential crisis. But as I thought about it some more, I asked a friend of mine who's a world famous author, and I was like, hey, why isn't anyone giving these blind readings? Like, why is that something that people just don't seem to like to do?
Mhm.
And he said, because no one wants to embarrass themselves. And
Ah,
I was like, but that can't be a reason for anything. Like, why would you even say that? And you know what? I'll tell you. When I was in London and I went to Watkins, I'll pick up the book. Hold on, let me show you the book. Oh my God, I'm all over the place. But when I was in London, I went to Watkins. I bought a copy of this book, which is Working with Astrology: The Psychology of Midpoints, Harmonics, and Astrocartography by Michael Harding and Charles Harvey.
oh, I think I want that book.
Oh my God, it's the most amazing book. It's the most amazing thing since sliced bread. So anyway, I bought that book, and in the back of the book, they're essentially giving blind readings. They're writing up their delineations of the chart using traditional astrology, midpoints, harmonics, and astrocartography. And then they make a point, I'm sure I highlighted the point, but they make a point in it where they say that yet, from the point of view of studying astrology, the blind analysis is an invaluable, indeed indispensable tool. It focuses our attention on principles and potentials and helps to ensure that we are really getting to grips with the astrology of the case rather than matching assorted chart significators with known facts.
There you go. But to be clear, I kind of think both ways work. Um,
Yes,
and
yes.
when I do an intake form and people write their questions and everything, I think
Hmm.
I find I would have done exactly the same if I'd done it blind as if without the intake form. So,
Precisely. But so here's what I say in every YouTube video that I post about these blind readings. I always say that I'm not advocating that blind reading a chart is the only way to read a
No,
chart. And I also don't think that blind reading is a sustainable model of client counseling,
no.
because counseling takes us into a completely different field of astrology where we need to have counseling tools, which is a part of why I became a certified hypnotherapist, because that gave me the counseling tools necessary in order for me to sit with a client and hold counseling space with a client on top of the astrological space that they're there for. But so blind reading is not my consultative model. And I always tell people that how I demonstrate how to read a chart is not how I work with clients.
Yeah.
And that's two very different things. Um, and so I completely subscribe to knowing how to counsel someone. I completely subscribe to listening and letting that be a part of the astrological process.
Mhm.
But I think that in another category of astrology where we're becoming brilliant astrologers and where we're sharpening our skill set as astrologers, blind readings are an indispensable tool because they force us to really have a full grasp of astrological language so that we can talk about the symbolism in a chart based on its own merits, as opposed to piecing together things that we already know with astrological factors.
Yes. You should.
So anyway, that's my spiel.
I think when you get the recording, I think you need to transcribe that whole bit. That's perfect.
I'll put it in my book.
Okay, yeah, do. So yeah, I saw you were writing a book. So in
Yes.
fact, let's just tell everybody about that now. You're writing a book, and when do you think you will be publishing that book?
Oh,
And
I
what?
am writing a well, I'm technically writing two books, which is the bane of my mutable existence. I can't do any one thing for too long.
No wonder we get along.
Yes.
Majorly mutable.
So I'm writing two books, one of which is called Hori Astrology and the Natal Promise, a textbook of modern integration. And the other one is called The Kabbalistic Tarot, the Astrologer's Field Guide to the Cosmos. And
I'll be buying that one.
and I run a very intense astrology ship.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's that obvious on the outside, but internally, I run a very intense daily astrological ship in terms of meeting clients. That takes up my daily existence. And then in terms of the interviews that I do for the True Divination podcast, which is my podcast on YouTube, people should go check it out, the True Divination podcast. Um, so I have a full blown astrological career, and then I run a school as well. So I meet clients every day, I talk to my students every day, and I try to not interview people every day because that becomes very overwhelming. But
Yeah.
sometimes it does happen. Like the most ridiculous interview I did was at 2 a.m. with somebody in Australia. So so I think when you're working as a full blown astrologer like I am,
Mm.
you don't really it becomes very difficult to carve out the time to do the writing necessary to be published.
It does.
So
Yeah.
I have the first manuscript of Hori Astrology and the Natal Promise, and I have it by my bedside. And so because my background is in journalism, like I'm a broadcast journalist by profession, even
Mm-hmm.
before astrology and stuff, I do my own editing work and then I send it to somebody else, one of my colleagues from university who will continue to edit it. So at the moment, I'm editing the first draft of my book and trying to make it a little bit more readable and to make it sound like I actually know what I'm talking about. So, so hopefully, before the end of the year, I will have the book in a printing house, and hopefully it'll be ready by early 2021, assuming that the world doesn't blow up before then,
Yeah,
because that's.
it could. The way things are going.
Do you know? do you know that I think they just found like some brain-eating amoebas or something? So now coronavirus like is like a thing of the past. Now we have to worry about squirrels that have the bubonic plague,
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
and these germs will eat out your brain cells. It's like ridiculous 2020.
Mind you, I kind of have a theory that some people's brain cells have already been affected now. But we won't go there now.
Precisely.
So tell me about being a memory athlete. I just love this. And you bring this into your teaching, I believe.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. You know, it all started with Robert Hand.
Uh-huh.
Rob Hand said in a lecture once that nobody has ever memorized the table of essential dignities.
Uh-huh.
And you don't memorize the table of essential dignities, you cut it out and you carry it around in your top pocket. That's a Robert Hand quote.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And once again, I have Saturn issues and I have Pluto issues. So you're not going to tell me that I can't memorize the table of essential dignities, no matter how daunting it is, just because like my brain doesn't work that way.
Uh-huh.
So when I heard him say that, I went out to find how do people memorize stuff.
Uh-huh.
Like ever, like in because I couldn't imagine 12th century astrologers cutting out a piece of parchment and carrying it around in their top lapel. So, so,
Or a
so
stone tablet before that.
precisely. So I wanted to know how did people memorize stuff,
Mm.
and that's when I typed in memorization on Google, and the rest was history. I found out about this entire memory, the memory world championships, and that there are actually memory athletes and people who train themselves to memorize a deck of playing cards and copious amounts of information. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. And then I sought out the Grand Master of Memory who lives in South Africa, and his name is Kevin Horsley.
Right.
And Kevin taught me how to be a memory athlete. You know, it costed me a small fortune, but he taught me how to be a memory athlete, and I took that information and then I applied that to astrology, and I specifically went to him with the intention of memorizing very specific things in astrology, and he taught me how to colonize my brain with more brain. And so I teach that to my students. I teach those methods to my students in a very light format because, you know, not everyone is going to be a memory athlete.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I do. Every night before I go to bed, I memorize a pack of playing cards in 2 minutes or less. And that's my daily training. And then I teach my students this stuff every day. And then that's also a part of how I stay in the loop. But I haven't been competing at all recently. And actually, I was supposed to be competing this year in New York in the Memory World Championships. But of course, no one's flying to New York ever again. So,
Yeah. So I have to ask you at this point,
uh-huh.
what's your sun, moon, and rising?
Oy vey, you know, on our first date.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, you
so
must.
okay, so I'm probably not going to tell you more than that,
No,
but
that's fine.
um, but I have my sun is in Taurus,
Uh-huh.
my moon is in Gemini, and my rising is Sagittarius.
Sagittarius sun, Sagittarius rising, moon, Gemini. So,
Ah, okay, there we go. That's why we're, you know, we're
yeah.
having this
What
connection.
degree is your moon? I have to...
15, and that's it.
12. 12.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're like my lunar sister.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
I kind of was thinking he must have a Gemini moon.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So I don't want to know anymore. That's fine.
Yeah, okay,
Unless
good.
you want to send me your chart off.
Yeah, I'll probably do that on the side, but
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant about the wider astrological community having my entire chart. I think that, especially the way how I use astrology, like I've had astrology readings from like some of the greatest astrologers in the world that reveals far more than an astrology reading should be able to reveal.
Yes.
So I'm a little bit on the fence when it comes to like showing my whole chart, but I'll definitely send it to you privately.
Cool. Whereas I don't care. Mine's all over. But I
You
respect your privacy.
you should get a reading. Judith Hill is someone who I really admire, and she's someone who I've worked with for a while. And Judith Hill is a phenomenal astrologer. You should get a reading from Judith.
Uh-huh.
Also, in the UK, Christine Skinner is like my best friend in the whole wide world. Do you
Oh,
know Christine?
I don't.
Oh
No,
my
I'll be
God.
finding her.
Yeah, Christine, I mean, she's been involved in the AA and she's been involved in all sorts of things. And she's like world famous, even though she doesn't believe so. And she lives in London and she's amazing, amazing, amazing. Christine Skinner. She's like
Okay.
one of the top, like I have like a short list of the top astrologers in the world. And
Uh-huh.
on that list is Gary Kristen, who's my mentor, the Iranian astrology.
Mhm.
Christine Skinner, even though she'll hate that I'm calling her one of the top anything, but she's really amazing. And then Judith Hill. Judith Hill is really, really, really phenomenal. Do you know about Judith?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do.
Judith Hill
Yeah,
is really, really
yeah,
phenomenal as well.
yeah. But people should also go and get a reading with Michael. So he's.
Please, I
I'm
mean,
here to promote you.
oh, thank you. I mean, so if it's any consolation to the general public, I've learned from all three of those people, and so I've consolidated the best of their whatever within my tiny brain. And if you want to see me doing a blind reading, which once again isn't the only way I do readings, but if you do want to see me doing a reading, you can check out my podcast on YouTube, which means it isn't really a podcast, but whatever. It's on YouTube at the True
It is.
Divination podcast, and you could type in blind reading and you'll find me giving readings.
Yeah, and also the Oraculous Astrology Facebook page.
Hmm.
Where
Yeah.
else are you on social media?
So, so the Oraculos School of Astrology is the Facebook page for the school, but also for people who are interested in learning how to blind read charts and really, really get sharp at that skill. We have an Oraculos Blind Chart Reading Academy, which is also on Facebook. It's a private group, so you can look it up and just hit join. We don't have any questions. You could just hit join, and then I'll see you in the drop down menu, and I'll just add everyone. I add everyone except for like two people. But
Yeah. Oh, I'll join. Yeah.
yes,
And
please do it. It's really cool.
I'm going to talk about a couple of other things on your website, but
Hmm.
because I was asked to interview you by the Queer Astrology Conference, just tell us a little bit about your involvement with that and your talk. It was on horary, right?
So the Queer Astrology Conference, I think like the prerequisite for being a speaker at the Queer Astrology Conference was that you had to be like queer. So I met that prerequisite, and so got that out of the bag. Um, but the other thing was, yeah, they wanted gay queer people to come and speak on different topics that really matter to them. And so the talk that I gave was Hori Astrology and the Natal Promise, because I'm a Taurus, so that's the only talk I'm going to be giving until my book is published. Hori Astrology and the Natal Promise. So
And so that I found that really interesting. In the description, it said you tied back the horary chart to the
hmm
natal chart. I have not really practiced horary, so
hmm
if you could give a real quick.
so Hori astrology is basically the astrology of questions. It's you there's a birth time for you being born into the world, and there's the birth time of your deepest, most sincerest question being born within your heart. And the moment when a question is born within you is taken as the Hori moment. And in the same way as your birth chart crystallizes the potency and the potential and the story and the promise of your life within this incarnation, the Hori chart also crystallizes the answer to any sincere question you have within a moment. So that is my Cliff Notes version of what Hori astrology is. And
So this talk is about more than just searching for your keys.
you know, um, boy, the horror of lost objects is something that has never really inspired me much. And
Nor me.
once again, yeah,
Maybe that's why I've never studied Hori. So
yeah,
now you've intrigued me.
it's never really inspired me much, and it's never inspired me because people weren't coming to me to ask about their missing cat, or they weren't coming to me at the age of 13 to ask about their missing wallet. My mom's friends were coming to me to find out, should I leave my husband? Like those were the questions
Yeah.
that people came together reading for, or um, things that had some concrete sense of materiality to it.
Mm.
And while, finding missing objects is very concrete and it's also very material,
Hmm.
it's just never tied in with my greater concept of the human condition. If you've lost your keys, go look for them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so where do you time the deep question then?
You said where?
Where, what point do you time where the question was asked? So for example, I've just had a client book a reading with me, and on the intake form, she has a specific question. Would you time it from when she completed the intake form, or?
So the Hori question is valid when you, the astrologer, know and understand the meaning of the question. So it's similar to tarot. I'm really a keen proponent of the interaction of astrology and other systems of divination. So I practiced tarot, I practiced I Ching, I practiced the runes. When
Mm-hmm.
I was 12 years old, I gave my life over to my Lord and Savior, Odin, because in a past life, because in the past life, I'm pretty sure I was like a Norse Viking woman or something. So, so anyway, I practice multiple systems of divination, and I'm very keen on Hori astrology being used alongside other systems of divination. Because if you give a tarot reading to someone, that moment of the tarot reading qualifies as a Hori moment. You can cast a chart for the moment of that reading, and the chart is going to say exactly what the cards say. They will be an exact parallel of each other. And so this is why I'm violently ambivalent towards people who have this internal reaction towards tarot as if it's somehow less than astrology,
Oh,
because
it's
tarot, yeah, yeah. And you do tarot as well.
yeah. I mean, probably not as much as deeply as you, but this is
Hmm.
why I picked this deck, the tough deck, because it ties in with the astrology for me. Well, all
Yeah,
decks do, but this one works for me. This is mine.
yeah, precisely. So, I mean, tarot, when it's wielded by the hands of someone who understands tarot,
Hmm.
is just as potent and powerful, and sometimes even more so than astrology. So, you know, I'm saying all of this, and I'm not even sure it ties in with your question. Please forgive me. I have
No, it does.
Mercury problems.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But the whole point is that all systems of divination, they all do one thing.
Mm.
Whether it's tarot, whether it's runes, whether it's I Ching, whether it's geomancy, whether you're throwing a bag of sand in the air and spinning around 3 times and spitting over your shoulder, all systems of divination do
Tea
the
leaves.
same thing. Yeah, precisely. Tea leaves. They all do the same thing insofar as all systems of divination, they crystallize in symbolic form the astrological influences of the moment.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, and whereas Hori astrology, it gives you the chart that shows you the astrological influences of the moment, that same chart comes up in the tarot reading that you do in the moment, the tea leaves that you see in the moment, the runes that you pull in the moment, the I Ching hexagram that you cast in the moment, they're all going to be tied in with the astrological chart of the moment, because the ghost within the machine of divination is actually astrology.
You're right. Wow. You just blew my mind about how you worded it. I kind of knew all this stuff, but
Yeah.
but I love how you word it. So you're so eloquent. So
Oh.
I want to talk about your website a little bit because I
Mm-hmm.
realize we're almost at the hour, and people's
Mm-hmm.
attention spans. I could
Mm-hmm.
talk
Yes.
I could talk to you all day, but you've got a Foundations of Classical Astrology course coming up. I
Hmm.
think that's kind of your next one, but just
Yes.
tell everybody how they can study with you about your 2-year diploma, everything. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, if you want to study astrology with me, you can check out my website at www.oraculosastrology.com. And I'm sure Lou is going to put it down below in the description or something so you could
I am.
find it. And what is really special about this course with me is that it's based on my client work. It's based on, like, that's all I've done. I don't even know how it's possible for me to have gotten a university education in anything, because all I've been doing my entire life is giving readings to people.
Mhm.
So that those 5 years of my life in university are an absolute miracle, because I was giving readings to people all throughout university because I wanted to, like, go places, and my
I was
parents were
anybody that would let me.
yeah. Yeah, I needed to make additional money, and my parents were only sending me $50 a week, so I needed to, like, give readings to people because that was my only additional skill other than talking, and that got me in trouble more than it got me clients. Anyway, so if you so my course is based on my client work, and which is really important to me, because the students who have been coming to me this year and last year, they've all come to me saying the same thing. I just graduated from so and so's course and I don't know a thing.
Mm,
Or I just graduated from so and so's natal astrology course and I still don't know how to read the chart. They took me through all of these technicalities and all of this classical hoo-ha, but I still can't read the chart if you held a gun to my head. Or I finished this Hori program and I still don't know how to answer a
yeah,
question. And I hear these questions and I don't know, it's like people find me. I'm just in my bedroom doing astrology, and people come to me with all of this stuff because I attract people's problems. But that has driven me and inspired me to create this sort of program, because I want to teach people
mm,
just, okay, now that you've filled up your mind with all of this stuff, here is how you actually do the stuff. Yes, you've studied astrology in the world. Now come to me, let me teach you how to be an astrologer.
yeah.
And that's really my passion. I love teaching people not just what to do, but how to do it, not just what to learn, but how to learn. And every student who studies with me and leaves from me goes into the world being able to practice tangible, concrete astrology within a very short space of time, because I teach them memory techniques as well, but because I just teach them how to practice astrology. And I'm still not sure I answered your question, but that's what I teach.
Well,
And if you're interested in that, you could find me.
and so there's a link to for the people to look at this Foundations
Hmm.
course on your website. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I couldn't
And
actually
and the
click on it.
I, and the foundations course is like the best thing since sliced bread, in my opinion,
Uh-huh.
because I'll quickly say this. Right now, I'm running a Renaissance Astrology Summer Intensive in which I'm supposed to be teaching people how to read Hori charts and natal charts and solar return charts and do the whole thing that I talk about in my book of Hori Astrology and the Natal Promise.
Mm,
And what I found during the first week of the course is that there are people in the course who've been studying astrology for forever, 20 years and 30 years and 15 years, and didn't know how to read charts.
yeah,
One, and then the second thing was that this course that I'm running is an intermediate level course, but a lot of the things that I found myself having to teach people in this intermediate summer intensive so that they can keep up in the summer intensive are things that I teach in my foundations course. So
mm,
it's not your average foundations course. It's the most advanced foundations course I've ever seen, because you learn how to do things that people usually teach you in, like, the advanced level of their
yeah.
program, and you learn how to do it well. So anyway, I'm shutting up and saying that if you want to study with me, the best place to start is the foundations course, because it's easier to teach someone from scratch
Hmm.
than to teach you in the middle and then have to try to catch up on things that you should have learned had you taken my foundations course.
I agree. So, final question, and then I'm just going to ask, just to remind everybody where they can find you. Which house sister?
Oh my God. Just kill me now.
And I'll tell you my theory after you tell me yours.
Okay. Um, okay. So to borrow from my friend Jen Zart, Dr. Jen Zart,
Oh
I
yeah, I
use
love Jen.
I love Jen.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she's amazing.
Mhm.
To borrow from Jen, I use whichever house system is appropriate based on what it is I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Now, that is my overall politically correct answer, but it's not really the truth for me because I use Regiomontanus through and through within the context of my traditional astrology.
Mm-hmm.
I use Reg consistently for Hori astrology, natal astrology, anything that I'm doing with the
Oh.
traditional pizza pie chart. I use Regiomontanus.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, well, that's not true because I also use whole sign houses. So I use a mix between Regiomontanus and
Uh-huh.
whole sign houses just because I think it's responsible astrology to use whatever house system you use, as well as whole sign houses. I think the two of them, a quadrant-based house system like Placidus, Porphyry, Reg, whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
whole sign go well together. But I think that we should use the two things in tandem, and so that's how I approach classical astrology. But the aggravating response is that in Iranian astrology, we use six houses.
Yeah,
We
I
have
know it's very different. Yeah.
we have six house systems. So
Uh-huh.
there's the meridian houses, the houses of your MC, the houses of your moon, the houses of your sun, the houses of the Aries point, the houses of your node, and the houses of your ascendant. So we have six different house systems, and these six different house systems give different perspectives because essentially you can stand on any point in your chart and look at the rest of your chart and have a different perspective. So the way how my chart looks to my moon is different from the way how the chart looks from the perspective of my sun,
Yeah.
which is different from how the chart looks from the perspective of my node.
Yeah.
So there are these different perspectives, and so Uranian astrology really allows you to have no attachments to anything because you realize that it's all a matter of which framework I want to look at life from.
Well, my favorite saying is always work. I'm not attached. I use Porphyry mainly because
Mm-hmm.
I do consultant astrology. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a friend who's trying to convince me that whole signs is it's the way. But
Oh my
it
God,
works.
those people,
But it
those
works.
whole,
But it works
it,
for a lot of things. Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, those people. Yeah.
those whole sign houses people, like they're so bossy.
Oh, well, she's an Aries too. If you're
Yeah,
listening, I love you.
yeah, but I mean those whole sign houses people, they're so bossy. I'm really not a fan of anyone who says this is the way to do anything, which is my contention with traditional astrology,
Uh-huh.
because in traditional astrology there's so much of this is how you do this thing. And I studied traditional astrology for most of my life. Like I can operate in traditional astrology through and through, and I know that it's not the only way.
Not.
So whole sign houses are wonderful. I think that they work well, but there are nuances that you get with your quadrant based house system that you don't get with whole sign houses. And I mean, you using Porphyry is amazing because you're basically a Uranian astrologer because Porphyry of the quadrant house systems, Porphyry is like the Iranian house system of choice.
Yeah.
Well, at least for my mentor Gary, he uses Porphyry because he really likes it.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, the point is that I think everything works, and this is the difficulty that a lot of people who study traditional astrology they don't like because.
Mm.
How is it possible for everything to work? Well, guess what? Our astrology is holographic. And in a holographic astrology, there are many ways to look at this astrology and it will tell you different things and it's all valid.
It is.
So that's my soapbox speech.
And we completely agree. So, where could everybody find you? And then we should wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm dangerously long winded. I should have
Oh,
told
I am. I could be on for 2 hours, but nobody will listen for 2 hours.
precisely. So So if you want to find me, first of all, please do check out my podcast, the Oraculos True Divination Podcast. That is on YouTube. Just go on YouTube, type in the True Divination Podcast, and you'll find me. There's amazing interviews there with amazing astrologers. Lou, I have to interview you now that you've interviewed me. We have to keep this cycle going.
Yeah.
So please go and check that out. And also, you can find me at www. oraculosastrology.com, and then I'm on Instagram at the True Divination Podcast. And if you want to send me an email, you can email me via my website if you want to get a reading or if you want to study or anything like that. And my more immediate email address is primordialtouch@live.com. Please don't ask about it, just accept it. That is primordialtouch@live.com.
Oh, and I think I just love Mychal. I knew I would. Oh, so it's goodbye from Lou and goodbye from Mychal.
Bye.